it for the Grizzlies. Show-stopping performance by Ja Morant.
Hello and welcome to Hoops Royalty. I'm King Jemison, alongside, as always, my man in Cleveland, Karna Venkatraj. And this is the most fun, most exciting, most relieving episode of Hoops Royalty to date because Ja Morant is back. And he delivered with 34 points, 8 assists, and an epic game winner to beat the New Orleans Pelicans last night. And to really turn around the entire course of the Grizzlies season. It was an amazing night to be a Grizzlies fan after 25 really, really rough nights before that this season. Karna, today we're going to get into the takeaways from Ja Morant's return game. But before we get into the basketball specifics, just talk me through your emotions of watching Ja Morant back on the basketball floor.
I almost got a noise complaint from my apartment, almost certainly. I for both in the first quarter and a half and in the last moments of the game. It was just exciting, and we'll get into it. It was fun to be excited about Grizzlies win or lose. It was fun to be excited about Grizzlies basketball, and it's the first time we felt like super excited, basically since the first game of the season. So it just felt great to be excited about basketball again. It felt great to be excited about Memphis Grizzlies basketball again. God, it felt so good.
Dude, I mean, you and I watch every game because we love the Grizzlies, because we have this podcast. And, you know, I start every game excited to watch them because of my favorite team. But that meme where it's like, oh, I hate my life after the first 3 minutes of a game, that's pretty much what it's been for the first 25. Because even when the Grizzlies were winning, it never looked easy and it never looked fun. But Ja Morant just injects such life into every basketball game he touches. And this one was one of his finest performances, particularly in the second half, because, you know, it was an incredibly fun night. It didn't start that way. The Grizzlies were down by 19 at halftime, had trailed by as many as 24 in the second quarter, allowed a 28-2 run in the second quarter, and we're going to talk about some of the lineup decisions that allowed that to happen. But it kind of felt like the season was done at that point. You're like, okay, we have Ja back. He's looking fine, but he's not substantially changing things. And the Grizzlies need him to change everything to turn the season around and make the playoffs. But that's exactly what happened in the second half. It was a different team playing with a different energy. Everybody was slotting back into their ideal roles. And sure enough, you get your first win over a good team at full strength. I mean, their only win over like a playoff caliber team before this point was Dallas, and that was without Luka. And I guess the Clippers as well, but that was a Clippers team mired in a losing streak. This was the first time you beat a good team who was fully healthy and playing well. And it's not a coincidence that it took Ja Morant to achieve that. But Karna, let's get into it. What was your first takeaway from Ja's return game?
I think Taylor Jenkins is still trying to figure out this is decidedly a negative for the coaching staff, which is they're still trying to figure out lineups. And I get Ja Morant is a kind of he is not a plug and play sort of player. He's a player that you build and play around. So yeah, that drastically changes how you think about the offense. But you have guys that were trotting out there like Conchar, Aldama, Xavier Tillman lineups that there's just not a whole lot of offensive creation. You trot them out there to shut down other offensive weapons that the team might have while resting some of your stars. But you can't have Desmond Bane on an island out there having to create for himself with no real offensive weapons or threats really built around him. And those were some of the biggest negative net rating lineups. Thanks for the lineup tool. But those were kind of emblematic of some of the lineup decisions. And you can just tell from the eye test, too. There were some Conchar Aldama lineups that really, really just struggled to score, struggled to get going, and were out there for extended minutes when the Pelicans were making a run. So that was a little scary to see. I think I'm willing to give grace to Taylor Jenkins and say he will figure it out as the season goes on. But that is a question and something that we should be tracking as the season continues. is how the injection of Ja changes the calculus within the coaching staff about who they should be playing and who they shouldn't be playing. It also connects to the front office, right? Some of these guys that we think are top tier NBA role players or talent have panned out not to be, right? Like, I'm willing to give Santi and David Roddy time, um, and let them reach their potential and trust our player development staff. But I will also argue right now their development is not such that you can just trot them out there and say, hey, especially against the top tier NBA teams. I'm not saying the Pelicans are, but like higher tier NBA teams, and say, hey, this is y'all's team for the next like 5 minutes. Go see what you can do. You just can't do that. So we got to figure out the lineups, and we got to get some better role players if we want to make a championship run. That's all it is.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that the Grizzlies' lineup issues and depth issues are by no means fixed. They will get better, hopefully this week, as Marcus Smart is slated to return this week. We don't have a clear update on Luke Kennard, but it looks like he might be coming back within the next couple games as well. Then you're at least going to be trotting out almost entirely competent NBA players. But shout out to the Bismack Biyombo, John Conchar, Desmond Bane, Santi Aldama, Vince Williams Jr. lineup, which played 4 minutes and lost those 4 minutes by 11 points. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
And it's not a coincidence because those guys aren't creators outside of Bane. And so it's a lot of offensive pressure on Desmond Bane in a night where he struggled in the first half. He very much turned it around in the second half, but you got to know who's rolling at that particular moment. It would have been much better to have Ja or Jaren out there with those other 4 guys rather than Bane in the first half of last night's game specifically, because he was struggling to create his own offense while those guys were mostly getting what they wanted. Jaren shot 15 free throws last night. And of course, Ja had 34 points and 10 free throws of his own.
And that's kind of a sub takeaway too, is you expect Desmond not to have a bad night, especially in those first couple quarters. So I on paper, if you told me that lineup was out there for a couple minutes, sure. You just expect Des to get some baskets, some pick and pop things, just classic Desmond Bane basketball. But it just wasn't falling last night, both inside and outside. So I would like to see Taylor Jenkins be a little bit more adjustable with his game plan. That was a horribly bad lineup. I don't know. It's not necessarily a depth thing. It's more, the depth that you have. Marcus Smart and Luke Kennard's out. It's not a surprise. So why are we trotting that lineup there for an extended period of time? Yeah, you have to run out your stars at an extended period of time for those games. You do. It's win now mode, right? If we're not tanking, we're in win now mode, and every game matters, especially when 12 games away from 500. So, yeah, I mean, you just can't trot that lineup out there for an extended period.
4-point first quarter lead and turn that into a 19-point halftime deficit. That second quarter was a nightmare, and I felt numb during it because I've just gotten used to the Grizzlies getting their brains beaten in by good teams. It happened the previous night on Monday in a very forgettable loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder that I think everybody in Grizzlies Nation would collectively like to just forget and move on. But yeah, it was more of the same. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. And that's going to take us into my first takeaway, which is Ja Morant makes everything easier for the Memphis Grizzlies offense. This is a team that has really struggled to generate easy baskets. I think that's an understatement. They were the very worst offense in terms of net rating in the NBA before Ja's return. And a lot of that is they ranked 28th in paint points per game. They were second to last in free throws attempted. They were in the bottom 10 in fast break and second chance points. All these easy sources of offense that they have relied on in the Taylor Jenkins and Ja Morant era just have not been there this season. Insert Ja and things look a lot different. The Grizzlies scored 62 paint points last night, their second most of the season. Morant had 24 in the paint by himself, and when you include the fact that he had 10 free throws, he was unstoppable getting to the basket. And the only way the Pelicans could stop him is by fouling him, and he was making his free throws as well. So obviously he is getting those points, but he's also generating easy baskets for his teammates. There were some great passes he had, even in the first half when the Grizzlies were struggling, to Zaire Williams, to Bismack Biyombo, guys who we know are simply play finishers. They are not play starters. They are not creators. But if you give them a wide open layup, they can hit it. Xavier Tillman came in and looked a lot better because, again, he only had to take open shots that Ja Morant was generating for him. So now that Morant is back, you are going to see the Grizzlies get back to their old ways on offense, which is scoring a lot of points in the paint, probably getting to the free throw line quite a bit, and foreshadowing another takeaway I'll have later on in the episode. They're also going to look better on the boards and generate more second chance points. And the thing is, they didn't even do what I would expect them to do in the fast break. They only had 13 fast break points per game, or 13 fast break points in last night's game. That number is going to skyrocket as Ja continues to get more comfortable. It's a credit to his own half-court scoring ability that they were able to put up 115 points despite not getting much done in transition.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think one thing that's interesting too is one of my things to see or predictions for the game was Ja Morant using that floater. Thankfully, he proved me right, especially in the last couple of seconds. So yeah, I think you're right, and I think that I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the inside out scoring was really big for Ja. And a lot of creation comes from that. I think there's one really big moment where he just drives into the lane and he's in the air, and I think he makes a corner pass to either Vince Williams Jr. or somebody, and that Vince Williams Jr. just nails the three. The guy's a creator. He's a natural born creator, and those two guys kind of bring me to my next takeaway, if you don't mind, King.
Go for it.
The Grizzlies play with just a different sort of swag and excitement, kind of like you were saying, swag and excitement. And it is largely due to Ja, but there's one other guy that's bringing it every single night, and it's Vince Williams Jr. The man hit a three-pointer. We're down 19 and a half. He hits a three-pointer in CJ's face and starts talking to him immediately. That is Memphis Grizzlies basketball. Amen. I'm so glad we have two guys just – I love a trash talker. I'm a natural-born trash talker, and I love a trash talker. I think Vince Williams Jr. and Ja Morant bring a ton of excitement to the team. And something that we were talking about off air is what Vince Williams Jr., even though it doesn't show up on the stat sheet, he's a big-time playmaker. He will block a shot when you need to. He blocked Jonas Valanciunas on what should have been an easy layup. He just plays solid perimeter defense. And he's a guy that, even though we don't have Marcus Smart right now, he fills that glue guy role. And it's always good to have more than one person like that on the team, and that excitement and swag that those two guys bring, that confidence that those two guys bring, really shows that Memphis Grizzlies basketball is back. I'm just going to say it. Memphis Grizzlies basketball is back. But it also maybe tells me something that's worrying, which is, and it's something that you kind of talked about, which is we are very jaw-centric right now. From a X's and O's perspective, but also from the passion that these guys are bringing on the court every single day. It shows us that Ja's clearly the alpha in that locker room. He's clearly the main guy. He's the one who presses go. But the issue with that is when you have someone it can be worrying for the franchise for someone who's had maybe the history that he has. Now, the 25-game suspension looks like a black mark. It should have never been 25-game suspension. I'm now firmly in King's camp on that, especially with recent behavioral decisions that the NBA's made. This team's excitement and passion is driven by Ja, and that is both insanely fun to watch, but also scary if you're a Grizzlies fan and you've been following kind of Ja Morant's background.
Yeah. Obviously, his off-court decision-making is not what you'd want to see from a leader. Yeah. But his on-the-court presence is among the best in the NBA at just creating energy and creating confidence in the rest of his teammates. They looked like a different bunch when he's rolling. And I do want to give credit to Desmond Bane. He is a leader as well, and he gets in people's faces all the time. He's just a quieter sort of leader. I think he personally has a lot of swagger and exemplifies the spirit of Memphis in the way he is constantly mixing it up with much bigger players. But he doesn't seem to have that effect on the rest of the team like Ja does. And then, of course, going back to Vince, I've been on the play Vince, start Vince trained from the beginning. I love that he did start in Ja's first game back, but he is such an incredible defender. And similar to Dylan Brooks, and I hate saying anything nice about Dylan Brooks after I watched him torch the Grizzlies on Friday night in person. It was miserable, but similar to Dylan Brooks, some of his defensive ability comes from that confidence, that swagger, and taking a matchup personally. Case in point, after he said what he said to CJ McCollum at the end of the half, he held CJ to 1 of 3 shooting in the second half. CJ had one of the worst late game shots I've ever seen. Would have killed somebody if there wasn't a backboard in the way. He got in CJ McCollum's head. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And we saw him get in Luka's head a few games prior. He is obviously got the physical tools to be a great defender, but more so he has the mentality. And that's what we're excited about for his continued development.
I think when we look at the NBA and the landscape of the NBA, sometimes we think of leaders and the synonymous is like the most loud guy on the team, the most brash guy on the team. And I don't want to take away that Desmond Bane is not a good leader, because there is something emblematic of leadership at the end of that game in the press conference when he says Ja's like, we should run a play for Jaren. And Desmond's like, no, we shouldn't. Just take control of the game. And I think that's leadership in itself too. Is like just understanding what your role is and what everyone else's role is and saying, no, you are a finisher, go finish, right? And I think there's such a real interplay and relationship with this young core that I don't think I've seen in like any young core, maybe in at least in recent NBA history, of guys who genuinely like being in the locker room together, genuinely seem to have a brothership and fellowship and want to win together. Off-court decision-making aside from Ja, these guys actually like each other and all want to lead the team. It's just Ja plays with a different intensity and swagger that I think is just pops off the screen. And I think it's really cool to watch him just light up a whole arena like he did Smoothie King last night.
And even better, to silence a whole arena, except for the hundreds of Grizzlies fans who made the trip. Shout out to them. Yeah. But the fact that they were booing Ja Morant was just really weird to me. Like, he didn't do anything to you. He served an egregiously long suspension and has been nothing but gracious and apologetic since his return. If you're booing him, it's just because you don't like him because he's in your division and is going to keep giving it to you for years to come. So Pelicans fans, that was a low-class move. And I hope that, if the same situation happened with Zion, that he's not getting booed every time he touches the ball. Like, appreciate a guy for the steps he took to come back.
I mean, I would boo, if I was a Pelicans fan, I would boo Ja Morant because we don't take that. I'd be booing the front office. Zion over Ja. I'd boo the front office, man.
Dude, that is too good. It is so interesting that these guys have such interwoven NBA paths. Both grew up in South Carolina, played on the same AAU team, get picked 1 and 2, and they both have all these off the court issues that are keeping them from playing.
Just looking around the NBA in the last couple months, I'm not going to get into each issue. What Ja, looking back on the suspension and what Ja has done relative to some of these other NBA guys, mild compared to what mild, not even illegal the second time. I'm glad we have our guy, and I wouldn't trade Ja for any other player in that league. I love him. I love the way he plays. I'm glad. Call 12. Love that guy.
Absolutely. And, my second takeaway is going to build off what you were just talking about with Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr., so I'll just get right into it. Those guys maintained big roles offensively, and everything was simpler for them too. That's exactly what you want to see when Ja is on the floor. The Grizzlies have never had 3 players average 20 points per game in the season. They have an excellent shot at doing that this season because you have Ja, who obviously only played 1 game, but scored 34 points. We know he's going to be 20 plus. Hopefully he's going to be like 27, 28 plus. Then you have Desmond at 24.4 points per game, Jaren at 21.5 points per game. Those guys should all still be able to maintain averages over 20, and it comes from the exact type of offense they were running in the second half. we talked at length last week about Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. as creators. That can take some of the pressure off of Ja, as he does struggle with his wind a little bit in these first few games. You can run possessions with Desmond Bane as the primary ball handler. You can run exactly what Ja was calling for in the final timeout before Desmond Bane shut him down, a post up for Jaren. These are easy sources of buckets for the Grizzlies too. And wherever Ja is on the floor, he is commanding attention. And so if Desmond Bane is running a pick and roll with Ja standing in the corner, it's going to be with a lot less defensive attention. He's going to be able to generate easier looks. And I don't even think Desmond Bane played that well yesterday, and he scored 21 points. He missed a lot of open shots we expect him to make. You're going to see him continue to put up the same kind of numbers he was before Ja's suspension. I think the bigger question mark to me is, can Jaren maintain his role? And that is going to take a concerted effort from the coaching staff and Ja Morant and Desmond Bane to get him the ball in the post, because he's still dominating guys. He was dominating folks last night. His 15 free throw attempts was really, really impressive to me. He is becoming an elite level grifter. He gets in the paint, he draws contact. He's finally learned how to sell that contact, and it's another easy source of offense. So I was just really encouraged that even in Ja Morant's massive return game, we still saw Dez and Jaren get theirs. For the Grizzlies to reach their offensive ceiling, we need all three guys involved at all times, and the second half showed that.
So let me ask you a question, and I think you alluded to the answer, but I want to push you on this takeaway a little bit. So you mentioned that these guys are going to hold serve almost offensively. If you had to guess which one would drop, who do you think it would be? Like, if you expect one of them to fall below 20 for an extended period of time, let's say for like a 5-game stretch, who would you think it would be, Desmond or Jaren?
Oh, definitely Jaren. Because, like I said, getting him the ball takes a little bit more of an effort.
Mm-hmm.
Desmond Bane is going to get his just in the flow of the offense as well, because Ja's going to find him for kickouts. He's going to run pick and roll when Ja's off the floor. And, you know, I think those two have shown an ability to be elite level scorers on the floor at the same time. Jaren does require the ball in his hands in a more disruptive way to the rest of the offense. You have to intentionally get him a post touch. You have to intentionally give him an isolation opportunity. And when you have Ja Morant, who is better in isolation, at least we think, it seems hard to justify that. But my argument would be the Grizzlies need to continue to let Jaren cook, because that is going to continue to lighten the burden on Ja. The Pelicans played terrible defense on Ja in the second half. I don't know how they could consistently think Herb Jones is going to lock him up one-on-one. I know they have a belief in Herb Jones as a defender, and he is a good defender. But nobody can take Ja one-on-one. Certainly not a player who is not that much bigger than him. I think we see Ja struggle more with really big, rangy defenders like Jaden McDaniels in Minnesota. But Herb Jones is not up to that task, and yet they continue to let him go one-on-one. That's not going to happen every game. So you need the defense to have to respect Jaren with the ball in his hands so that they continue to have to put Ja on an island as well. These three guys are top 30 players in the NBA. And it's not just in Jaren's case because of his defensive impact. He can be a top 30 offensive player in the NBA as well. It's just going to be on the Grizzlies to continue utilizing him like that. He's the one that could fall off if they become too Ja-centric.
Yeah, I agree, I'm glad. I'm glad that was my read too. It's not only the kind of X's and O's in a vacuum; it's also the time it takes to set up those X's and O's. I think that is very disruptive, right? Like, one thing that we don't talk about is like the NBA has now scored more points, or there's more point scoring in the NBA, not just because 3-pointers are up, but the time of possession is down, meaning that people are looking for quicker ways to score, and setting up somebody on the block takes a long time.
That's a great point.
And gets you really, really deep into your shot clock. And I think that that's really, really been a problem for a lot of big men in the NBA, not just Jaren. And that's why you develop an outside game, because now the pick and pop is a lot more effective at scoring points than something like, you hit me in down low on the block and that classic drop step 2 dribbles to the basket. Like that takes a lot of time because the big man has to get down the floor, set up, seal the other guy off. If the guy's a good defender, it's going to take even longer. So it's just not been a reliable way to score. And I agree with you. I think Jaren does a really good job of that. It's just not the most efficient time wise for the Grizzlies offense. I'm going to give you my last takeaway, King.
Hit me.
We're running up on time here. The Grizzlies in this next offseason or even at the deadline need to invest in a backup point guard that's more serviceable than Derrick Rose. I think Derrick Rose was a really, really good option for this year on paper. I think it has been a mixed bag of results. He's been better. He's been playing better recently. But getting rid of Tyus Jones, I think, was a mistake from the front office. I think they need to invest in a better backup point guard and better depth. And that's not saying Ja's going anywhere or it's going to be bad for the Grizzlies. I think it's just you need to give. He's still getting up to speed, and that his conditioning will get better. But having a serviceable a true point guard that can facilitate and move the ball around and is a little bit more of a physical presence than Jacob Gilyard will give the Grizzlies a better chance at going farther in the NBA playoffs when that time comes around. It may not be this season. I'm not going to make that claim. But if Kleinman makes that move and gets a true backup point guard, a guy who can hold water while Ja takes a seat, I think that opens up a lot for our role players and opens up a lot for our for Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. to play their natural positions in the offense.
Yeah. I can't agree more that the Grizzlies need another creator offensively. I'm not sure it needs to be a pure point guard. They had to let Tyus Jones go in a trade because he was their most valuable trade piece. And it would have been better with Tyus Jones in these first 25 games because he could have initiated the offense. They go 6-19 without him. Maybe they go, 9-16 with him, something like that. He could have swung some of those games, and that would be very valuable. But he can't really play with Ja on the floor at the same time.
It's true.
And he can become a playoff liability. Anybody who can't play with Ja is not going to be a major part of your playoff rotation, and so it's really hard to justify spending like $15 million on them. What the Grizzlies do need to be looking for is somebody else who can initiate offense. We talked about it with Jalen Noel. His success on the Grizzlies was really startling, not because of how good he was. He was fine. But it just showed how few guys they have who can make a play with the ball in their hands. And they have to get at least one or two of those guys either at the trade deadline or in the offseason, because you're going to have moments where either one or two of Ja, Bane, Jaren are off the floor or out of the game or whatever, or unavailable or whatever. And you got to have people who can still get you into your offense. So that's going to be a focus. Derrick Rose has been pretty good. Of major rotation guys this season, he has the second best net rating behind Vince Williams. And obviously Ja Morant would be number one because he played
unlimited minutes. I feel like net rating is becoming like a minimal stat. Like if you're not contributing that much and you've been missing a decent amount of games, the sample size is pretty low. And as the season continues, his effectiveness will almost certainly drop off. All that's to say too, going back to your point about a creator, like the pure point guard is just an archetype of that, right? Like you can take it for what you want, but you want a guy that can still run the offense when Ja's off the floor. And I think one point that I will say is, if he can't play with Ja, it becomes a lot harder. So a versatile point guard would be great, or a versatile guard in general. But I still think you need a guy like Tyus Jones in the lineup that can be a floor general when he comes off. Maybe the versatility to take the direction of Ja when Ja's on the floor, but not having a floor general when Ja's not on the floor hurt us this season, and it will continue to hurt you as you progress. Granted, I agree with you. Tyus Jones was our best trade asset. Maybe we need to trade him. I still think it was a mistake, but I would argue that the backup point guard can be found through the draft. It can be a trade asset. It can be found in a number of different ways. But having a versatile guard that can be a floor general is my main point. And until we have that, I think we are too jaw-centric, which is a risk that you've brought up before. So just something to think about as Desmond Bain and Jaren Jackson Jr. to continue to progress is if we don't want to be too jaw-centric, we need to find another creator, if that's a verbiage you want to use. But in my mind, it needs to be a versatile guard that can really play point guard and really create for other people.
Yeah. Derrick Rose has had a positive impact on the Grizzlies despite shooting less than 44% from the field, despite missing all these games. And that was always the thing with him. It's like, okay, you're using your last roster spot on Derrick Rose. Primary reason, so he can be a mentor for Ja. He provides energy to the fan base. But you also need him to be the point guard, or at very least the backup point guard, while Ja is out. And you're like, he might be able to do that physically when he's on the floor. And sure enough, he really struggled to stay on the floor. Similar to Noel, Derrick Rose's positive impact showed more about the deficiencies on the rest of the Grizzlies, that they did not have other people who could get them into their offense, who could generate a bucket for himself.
Yeah.
And Derrick Rose can still do that. And I think as he gets to play very limited minutes with Ja back, you're going to see positive things from him off the bench. He can give you 10 good minutes in a game while Ja sits and maybe score 8 points by himself, maybe generate 3 open threes for other guys. Like, he's just going to be able to be a spark plug, and in a much wider takeaway about everything when Ja Morant returns, he gets to slide back into an ideal role, and he's going to look better in that role.
That's a big takeaway. Yeah. Everyone's going to go back to what they were supposed to be doing when we started, and we're going to finally get back to Grizzlies basketball, both whether you want to come at it from a swag angle, whether you want to come at it from an X's and O's angle, whether you want to come at it from a data angle. The Memphis Grizzlies season has started now.
Yeah, they're 1-0. I don't know what 25 games.
Yeah, I love that tweet from Gang. We're 1-0. The Grizzlies have another test coming up with the Pacers. That is going to be an exciting game. That is a game I will be watching from the tip-off to the very last buzzer. That will be a very interesting game.
Yeah, Ja needs to prove that he is still better than Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton has had a fantastic season, is the darling of NBA Twitter. But Ja needs to come back and remind everyone who he is. He is still one of the best point guards in the league and one of the best young players in the league. And I think he's going to take that matchup personally. Yeah. But my last takeaway, it'll be quick, is Ja Morant had this really interesting positive impact on the Grizzlies rebounding last night. They had one of their highest rebound rates of the season. They delivered 17 second chance points and held the Pelicans, a much bigger team, to just 8 second chance points. Even with Jonas Valanciunas roaming the paint down there, bigger than anybody who was trying to box him out. And I see this happening for 2 reasons. And I'll start with Ja. Obviously, he grabbed 6 boards, but that's something that Derrick Rose or Marcus Smart or anybody else who was playing could do as well. He does get up, and I think he was particularly active on the glass last night, but it wasn't just his rebounds per se that changed things. It was the defensive attention that was being paid to him, allowing other people easy putbacks. You know, the Kobe assist is a famous result of the fact that he would take contested jumpers with 2 or 3 people on him. With Ja, it's not contested jumpers, it's contested layups with Steven Adams standing on the other side of the basket ready to just tap it back in. Now, nobody on the Grizzlies can do it like Steven Adams, at least not until maybe you get Brandon Clark back later in the season, but even Bismack Biyombo, even Jaren Jackson, even Xavier Tillman and Vince Williams and John Conchar, these guys who do compete on the boards, they're going to see some easy second chance opportunities when 3 guys fly at Ja, he throws up a layup, and it's basically like an assist because they catch it. They catch the board and put it straight back up and in. And then defensively, because you have Ja out there, you can surround him with guys who aren't creators offensively. You can feel comfortable playing John Conchar and Vince Williams and Xavier Tillman heavy minutes because you're not going to have to initiate any offensive action with them. They can purely be play finishers and hustle guys. And so that lineup freedom that Ja's presence and his offensive domination affords Taylor Jenkins is going to help with the rebounding too, because Vince Williams played 35 minutes last night he's going to continue to play 30 plus every night, because there were times where, even as good as he's been, his lack of offensive creation ability was a problem in lineups. Like we said in the second quarter with that terrible lineup the Grizzlies trotted out, where it was Desmond Bane and a bunch of guys who can't score, at least not on their own accord. But when you have Ja out there, Vince Williams is the perfect player to pair him with, because Vince can stand in the corner and knock down open threes, but more so, he can compete his butt off on the boards. We saw him even out-rebound Jonas Valanciunas, or out-fight Jonas Valanciunas for a few boards last night. And so I think that, which has been a problem for the Grizzlies this season, is going to get a lot better now that Ja's back, not because of his own rebounding, but because of what he allows the rest of the team to do.
Yeah, look, this is the thing. When you shoot 43 pointers a game and you have long rebounds, you're just not going to get them all. And when you shorten the court and you play more around the rim, I think that greatly benefits the assets that we have, which is surprising because you'd expect like Jonas Valanciunas to just dominate the boards. But the thing is, you have young, fast players that can get in position quickly and make plays, just like Vince Williams Jr. That's a great point, King. So I'm with you on that. I think, again, we are going to see a totally different Memphis Grizzlies team with Ja Morant. Some of these things, these narratives that we've been talking about since the beginning of the season, are going to start to change, which is why it's so great to have a brilliant basketball mind like King.
Like Karna.
But that was a great point. I'm with you there. What I noticed is when you shorten the court, it benefits our rebounders, and that's what Ja Morant does. He shortens the court. He gets to the rim almost at will. There's something about the way his hips or upper or lower body moves that just defenders just can't deal with. And I don't fully understand it, because it's not like he's a guy that is a physical presence in a way that LeBron or Giannis or Joel or someone is, but he has just this movement, this lightning quick movement that makes it so difficult for other people to just deal with. And I'm glad. One thing I wanted to see was him play inside out. He absolutely did that, and that was great to see. Correspondingly, we took less three. We still shot not great from 3-point, 32%, which we've seen worse this season. But things are starting to change. 31 attempts versus the 39 that we've seen throughout the season. So that's 8 less misses probably, based off of how we shot before. So we're starting to rely on it less and go to our bread and butter, which is jaw slashing and dashing and cutting up defenses.
Yeah, Karna, shout out to the TikTok that you had yesterday. You said the 3 things you were looking for Ja was him as a creator, and sure enough, he had 8 assists.
Yeah.
Him attacking the basket, and sure enough, all 34 of his points came either from points in the paint or free throws. And whether Dez and Jaren were still going to be involved, sure enough, both of them score over 20 points. So he checked all those Karna boxes.
Yeah.
And that was the most encouraging thing to see, is that he played his brand of basketball and it elevated everybody else as well. So his blend of lateral quickness, explosiveness, and elevation just must be terrifying for defenders to face. Like, I can't imagine having to stand in front of Ja Morant and stop that man from getting a bucket. And of course, the only way is to sag way off him and give him wide open threes. He was 0-5 last night, but hopefully over the course of the season,
I'm glad he's shooting them.
He's got to shoot him to make him respect him.
Yeah.
Well, Karna, any last thoughts?
Send me a pair of Ja ones. Also, I have 901.
I got my pair.
I was trying to get the Ja ones Christmas. I couldn't get them. They're ridiculous. Anyway, but no final thoughts. Give me Ja ones, man.
Sounds like Karna has a Christmas present idea. We don't have a Patreon yet, but if you would like to do an informal Patreon and send Karna Ja ones, we will be forever in your debt. But that's it for us at Hoops Royalty. I'm King Jemison, alongside, as always, Karna Venkatraj. It was so much fun to bring you these Royal Hoops takes today on the Memphis Grizzlies, on Ja Morant, on the NBA in general. We will be back, honestly, maybe not next week because that's right after Christmas, but possibly later in the week. And, of course, in the new year, as the Grizzlies try to fight back from their terrible start to the season and reach the playoffs anyway. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. 5-star reviews, nice comments wherever you listen to this podcast. Hit us up on social media. If you have any questions you want us to answer, we would love to do that on the show. But thank you for listening, and go Grizz.
Kind of take the possession off defensively. Morant drives. Morant lays